These are some films that my dad took with his movie camera. This would be in New Carlisle. This was Christmas in 1959. Carl, Kitty, Lucy, and Jim in the picture. And this was at the house on Brookfield Drive in New Carlisle. And there I am in the picture briefly. And there's Granddad Thresh at the table. He had moved down to New Carlisle to live with us. After Grandmother Thresh died, he tried to wanted to stay at the house in Forest, but really couldn't do it by himself. And we spent one winter, winter of 1957-58, in Forest helping, for him to try to be able to stay there, and they finally convinced him to move to New Carlisle, and so there he is with us, living with us at that time, and Dad cooking dinner, and looks like we had a big turkey. There was a fad that had started at that time. People they sold these aluminum Christmas trees, and they had a rotating light that set under it and changed colors so that you didn't have lights on the tree itself. Now this looks like the following year. This would have probably, I'm not sure what the date would have been, but obviously it's about a year later because Lucy's up walking around. So this was probably Christmas time in 1960. And there's my picture on the table. That was my graduation, my senior picture. So it dates it as being in 1960. We got everybody moving around since it was a movie camera, so had to have them do something. And this would have been probably in 1961, um, or it could have been in the. No, this was in 60. This was in the springtime, I believe. I think the films got mixed up a little bit. Yeah, this is 1960 because there I am in my graduation cap and gown, and that he graduated in 1960. Yeah, and again, this was at the house in New Carlisle on Brookfield Drive, the one that Mom and Dad bought in 1955. And this was a cookout we had, and I remember it was September. It was Dad's birthday, and I think Don Knuckles was there, and that's him in the blue shirt. His birthday was the same day as Dad's. Carl and Dad's birthdays were in September, so this was a cookout we had for one of them. And this looks like it must be Christmas of '61. Yeah, I kind of remember getting that for Carl. I was still living at home until Gladys and I got married in '62, and so I was working, had a pretty good job, and I remember Christmas shopping that year and being able to buy a lot of presents on my own because I was working and I wasn't living pretty cheap. I think I paid like $10 a week room and board, and so I was making by then I was making a couple of bucks an hour, and that was pretty decent. So yeah, it looks like they're getting ready to go to school, Kitty and Jim. Yeah, and that's Brookfield Drive. It's Kitty and Jim walking to. I think they caught a bus down the street. I don't think they built the elementary school out in that area yet. Yeah, and the pictures in the backyard. Kitty and Jim just returned from school. These are some new houses they were building at the end of the street on Brookfield Drive, and this was one of the demonstration houses. I believe this one is right at the end of Brookfield. Mom and Dad were thinking about buying one of the bigger houses there. At the time, we still had Granddad Thresh was living with us. I was still living at home, so the little 3-bedroom house was a little crowded. This is the beginning of the construction of that housing tract. I think maybe the reason that they held off buying a house is by that time Dad had been laid off a couple times from the railroad, and Mom was working. She was working for Harry White in a printing company there in New Carlisle, and that job, I think she ended up being laid off too. These were flowers. I think this was next door at our neighbor Jackson's. They grew a lot of flowers, and Kitty and Jim over there admiring the flowers. And Carl learning to play the guitar. This was a guitar that belonged to our grandmother Gardner, and when she passed away, they sold everything. Her house, the county owned everything, and they sold her house and all the belongings, and everybody had to bid at an auction. And Mom and Dad got the guitar for Carl, and I got the TV set that Grandma Gardner had, and several other things that they wanted to keep. But Carl taught himself to play the guitar with that little guitar. And the fence we had up there was probably to save Mr. Jackson's flowers from the kids more than anything else. But it was made from fence posts that we cut, little trees that we cut at a lot that Mom and Dad owned up in Bellefonte. It was right next to Uncle Harold's property. They bought a lot there with possible intention of building a house too, but later sold it to one of Uncle Harold's daughters, and for them to build a house there. And there's my '61 Corvair. Carl putting Lucy on top of it. So this would have been in the summer of '61. In a separate movie, I show scenes at the Indianapolis 500 when I took 3 of my friends in that car, and we drove to the Indy 500 and spent all night in it, and then went in the infield to see the race. And apparently we're back in winter now again. I'm assuming this is probably winter of '61. And this again is our backyard behind the house on Brookfield Drive. Field out behind there was a farmer named Blair, and of course that's now all a housing tract and has been built up over the years. But at that time, in fact, the summer of 1960, I still did a little work for that farmer. My friend Tom Morris and I worked for a couple of the farmers, and Mr. Blair was one of them. I think we had an ice storm that had come through New Carlisle, froze everything over. The kids they're skating in the backyard. So there's a scene somewhere I saw a clothesline that was coated with ice. So probably was an ice storm that came through. And it's springtime again. Background, a little sandbox that Dad built for the kids. And there's just a brief shot of a building there that he built on the back of the house. It was a storage shed. Poured the concrete for it and built that. This is probably spring of '62, I'm guessing. This is a friend of Dad's, somebody he worked with on the New York Central Railroad. That's Joe Wilbur and his wife. They lived in Springfield, but they came out to visit us that day. And they can tell that the housing tract is not very old. There's no trees grown up yet. I remember after we moved to California and been there for a number of years, and we came back on a trip one time, and all of a sudden, all of the trees had matured and gotten big, and that was the biggest difference I noticed. That just suddenly everything was grown up. That pine tree was actually a tree that we dug up in a lot and transplanted the lot that Mom and Dad owned in Bellefontaine. And this was a tree, when the houses were built, they put a tree at every house, but they put it in the front yard. And I remember Mom didn't want it planted in the front yard, and so they we ended up planting it ourselves in the back. But you see down the street, you see one tree in each front yard, and that was the plan. They came around, dug a hole with a forklift or with a tractor, and planted a tree and went right down the street, just plopping the trees in. And probably not a good place to put them because the sewer lines came in the front. And there's a picture of either me or Dad. When you change film, you turn the film over. You had to run the viewfinder, run it to start. That's Granddad Thrush outside, and this is in '62. There was the new station wagon that Mom and Dad had bought, and that was the same one that they took to to California in 1963 when we all moved to California. I think that's John DeLee in the picture. She and Kitty were about the same age. These are some scenes that Dad took. The last job he had on the railroad was he got a job on the L&N as a cook on a construction crew, but it kept moving farther and farther south, and he only did it for several weeks, and they kept getting so far away it was too long a drive, and he finally quit. This is somebody he worked with in the probably the camp cars, where he was located. I know it was somewhere in Harlan County, Kentucky, I believe, and he said that he had a railroad detective stationed with the cars all the time because people would come out and steal stuff from it. This is a kind of a family reunion at my Aunt Jessie's house in Gibsonberg. This is Gladys and I. This would have been in, I believe, in July of 72 or 62. This was right after we got married, and there's a lot of the family. The ones that I can name real quick. I'll try to. That is on the left is my Aunt Jessie, Claycy and Jessie, and then that's Aunt Bessie Holden. She was on the other part of the family. There's Loretta on the right, Uncle Cecil, Uncle Happy Barrett, in that order, sitting there. I think that may have been my cousin Tom and I playing badminton in the back. And of course, there's Mom. I think that was some of Jessie's daughters. Yeah, and there's little girl in the center is a neighbor. Forget her first name, but it was Lise, and there was 3 of the kids. Yeah, and that's Kitty and Lucy. In fact, Lucy was pretty rough on a couple of those dolls, no arms on it.